at deltadentalma.com.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at how we finished the day on Wall Street. And stop me if you've heard this before. A narrowly traded day on the street. The Dow, when all was said and done, down about 40 points. That's actually, let's see, I think we were down 75 points at one time. So we headed near the lows of the session. The S&P down 2.95, and the NASDAQ, which had been doing pretty well on the upside today, down about 4.5 points. Microsoft shares, though, hitting an all-time high in after hours tonight on the back of its earnings report. Josh Lipton is back now with more details on that report and maybe why the stock is surging. Josh?
Well, Bill, you're absolutely right. Microsoft stock really moving here in the after hours. And I'd call your attention to a new financial metric, which Microsoft just started formally unveiling with this report, and that is commercial cloud gross margin percentage, which is so important to investors because it's really that critical window into the future profitability of what has become Microsoft's most important business. And that number in Q1 clocked in at 49%. And just to put that in perspective, last time Microsoft reported on the company's conference call, Microsoft CFO said at that time it was 42%. So that 49%, I can tell you, way stronger than the estimates, at least I was seeing, the analysts I was talking to, and you can certainly see investors reacting here in the after hours. Guys, back to you.
All right, Josh, thank you for pointing that out. Let's bring in two Microsoft shareholders here, Julie Goodridge from North Star Asset Management and Tim Lesko from Granite Investment Advisors. Guys, good to see you. Julie, have you gone through a report? I'm just looking at one other metric besides the one that Josh pointed out, and that's the one that investors were looking for. Revenue at the Intelligent Cloud Unit, which is home to Azure and the server business, is up 10%, better than consensus. It was certainly a beat. Are you impressed?
I'm impressed, but what I'm mostly impressed by is how the company culture is hopefully shifting away from, Ballmer's leadership, which was kind of stagnant and didn't get us anything, to Nadella, who is hopefully embracing, what it means to be a company of the future, to include all different sorts of employees and all different kinds of engineers in top-level management.
Tim, what about you? I know you've been watching their business mix very carefully. The cloud is emerging as a better growth opportunity for them. Don't you agree?
Oh, I agree, and I think this is what everybody's been waiting for. You've had the PC business be a cash cow for them for a really long time, and it's difficult for big companies like Microsoft to turn and tack toward what is the future, and it seems like they've done it successfully. So as you see Azure, or what they're calling it now, Intelligent Cloud, grow to more than 30% of the revenue of the business with such great margins, it can have some tremendous earnings power going forward. So we're pretty pleased with the quarterly report.
Julie, what do you think might happen to Microsoft's culture, or really the growth prospects as well, with this LinkedIn acquisition? It seems like the stock has kind of come through this pretty well. A little bit of confusion about what the strategy was going to be at the outset, but how do you view the transaction?
Well, I see it as a broadening. You were talking before about the future. Sort of seizing the future and opportunities in the future. And I think that one thing that LinkedIn really brings is a sense of who the workforce is and who the future really is. And I think that the more that Microsoft can capitalize on that, and the more that Microsoft can move away from a corporate culture that was entirely sort of male-dominated and stagnant, quite truthfully, the better off they're going to be. And I think LinkedIn has a history of moving beyond that, and I think that's really good news for Microsoft.
And Tim, if the story here is the cloud and we see the progress and the growth in that space, how far behind Amazon are they at this point? We're just talking about Amazon Web Services, clearly the market leader. Is that going to be the next sort of battle royale here for the cloud dominance, or are they still too far behind?
Well, I don't think they're too far behind in what they're calling the intelligent cloud, where they're really delivering high-end cloud-based services rather than the commoditized cloud-based services. Across the business, the commoditized stuff keeps getting cheaper every year, but if you're delivering, secure transaction-based cloud services across the internet, you can still make a good margin on it. So I'm not really worried about how much market share they have against a behemoth like Amazon, because Amazon's willing to do it for less margin. So I just think that they have really focused on knowing their customers and delivering things that their customers want. and get rid of buying things like Nokia. Even the Skype acquisition is now far enough behind them that maybe we're starting to see them really focus on what their customers want rather than what they think their customers want.
Azure.
Yeah, but I just want to interrupt here. I want to interrupt here for a second because you guys, one of the things that's really important in terms of recognizing what your customers want is understanding who your customers are. And who the customers are is certainly changing in this country, and it's definitely changing internationally. So if you haven't got women, people of color, people from outside the country in your top-level management on your board, you're going to miss opportunities. And I think that's what was going on when Ballmer was involved with the company.
Boy, I'm glad you mentioned that, Julie, because I want to pivot you to Facebook very quickly here. I think you own shares of them, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, but you've been no big fan of Mark Zuckerberg, but yet he put this...
It's the company we love to hate, actually,
okay,
but go ahead.
How about this memo he put out in defense of Peter Thiel, who, donated $1.25 million to Donald Trump and took some heat for it. Peter Thiel's on the board there at Facebook, but Mark Zuckerberg wrote in the memo here, he says, we can't create a culture that says it cares about diversity and then excludes almost half the country just because they back a certain candidate. What do you make of that?
Okay. Well, I think it's kind of confusing logic, actually, because I understand that creating a culture of diversity is supposed to mean that you have different people with different opinions sitting down at a table together and making decisions as a group. But what they're talking about here is 1 out of 6 non-employee board members making an incredibly outrageous statement about his support for a particular political candidate. Let's not forget that Peter Thiel may be gay, but he's a white guy, and he's got a lot of money, and he's been on the board of Facebook since 2005. This is not a guy who is bringing something interesting other than, perhaps his past experience to the board of Facebook. And in fact, when you're talking about, people making good decisions about diversity, to have 1 of your 6 board members make such a play for a candidate. In this case, it doesn't have anything to do with party affiliation, quite truthfully, but a candidate in this case who goes against everything that you say your company stands for. I think that's problematic.
We thought you might have an answer for that. All right, Julie, good to see you. Thank you. Julie Goodridge, Tim Lesko, thank you. And by the way, we should note that Julie's best friend, former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer, will be on Squawk Box tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, so be sure to tune in for that. I know Julie will.
All right. An electric driverless car on a cross-country trip certainly sounds like a high-concept movie, but this is the real-life plan of Elon Musk for Tesla by next year. Up next, we'll ask a top analyst whether Musk's plans are actually a distraction